Are your markers missing you? Today I've got lots of marker tips to share with you, and we're going to be creating two very different antique floral cards. How long has it been since you've coloured with markers? There are so many different mediums out there, and I find that I kind of get a hang up on one thing at a time, and now I'm heading back to the markers, and I've had a few requests for this, so I'm going to share some tips with you today. I'm going to be colouring some antique style flowers, and the first technique I'm going to be using is simple marker colouring. What I like to do is to choose some colours, not necessarily ones that are meant to go together, but ones that are going to blend well. Because I want to create an antique style of flower, I am choosing some muted pinks and mixing it with almost like an apricot, pale apricot orange colour. And I like to test my colours on a piece of scrap cardstock just to make sure that the colours are going to blend nicely together and I'm going to get the look that I want. I've chosen to colour a bouquet today. This one's called Blooming Delight, and I think the open style flowers here are perfect for that antique look. So when you have a look at your stamp stash, make sure that you choose something that is going to go with the theme or the style of flower that you're colouring. And nice big flowers with open petals and lots of petals are a really good look for an antique style flower. What I'm doing here is colouring one petal at a time. Now this is not for the faint-hearted. It is not actually that hard to do if you take your time. But if colouring is not your thing, hold tight because I've got a really simple technique to create an antique look flower that anyone can do. I am using a fairly light touch with the marker, and I like to come back and forth with the same colours and remix them together, and you'll see what I mean as I'm colouring. I'm starting with my darkest colour in the centre of the petals, and whatever colour combination you choose, this is where I'd start. I'm actually using the second colour, like that apricot-y style colour, on the outer edge of the petals, and I am going to leave some white space between. I've got a light pink and I'm blending from both directions here, and I'm not going all the way to the edge of the petal on either end. So if I colour too hard with a lighter colour over some alcohol markers like these artist markers, it's actually going to lift the colour and lighten it. So these markers do take a minute or so to dry in the cardstock. If you are working too hard in one area, I would suggest just to give it a bit of a break, see how it dries, because it will lighten slightly as it dries, and then you can always come back and add some more. And that's what I want to share with you today, ways to take this floral kind of antique colouring a little step further. I think the white space is a really good way to add some lovely dimension and flow on petals, and in particular this looks great on an antique style flower. Like I said, this isn't for the faint-hearted. There are a lot of petals here and it did take time. I actually had a look at how long it took me to colour this whole image, and it was approximately an hour and a half. But I love to colour. I find it very relaxing. Obviously, you can get a very similar look if you have the coordinating stencils, which this particular stamp set does. But sometimes it just feels good to go back to a different medium using the same stamps and get a totally different look. And you'll find the products that I've used linked in the description below and also at the coordinating blog post. For the leaf images, I did exactly the same technique. I chose some greens that I thought would coordinate well with the petal colours, and I just added some colour along the veins and more towards the base of the leaf where it touches the petals of the flower. And then I came in, I like to sometimes start with a bit of a highlight, or the other option is I'll start with my darker colours. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I find that if I start too much with a darker colour, I don't leave myself enough highlight area. So whatever works for you and your style of colouring. And And this is just something that you're going to learn over time as you practice. You can colour the centre of the flower however you prefer. I went for some harvest sort of fall tones, which I think works really well with the antique style flower, and also because I had that apricot colour on the edge of the petals. Typically I prefer to have a dark centre in my flowers, but you can use whatever colours you think might work. Even a nice sort of pale green with some ivory undertones, that looks really pretty too. Are you ready? It's time to make your image pop and give it that wow factor. Don't be afraid to come in with a dark colour, something that's going to match and almost look like a deep shadow within the petals. I've chosen a deep sort of purple. It's almost like a grey purple, which gives it that shadow colour. I'm adding it where the petals meet the centre of the flower. I'm not being too particular and it doesn't look real pretty here. But I find that with an image such as these big open blooms, try not to think too hard about it. Make sure that you come in and blend a little bit, but you can always come back and blend more if you need to. Don't overwork it, because sometimes when you look back and look at the big picture, it's those rough sort of edges that give it that watercolor, almost antique look. And if you're not happy, you can always come in and add more. I like to also come in and add some what almost looks like shadows beneath the petals, just where I think the light might be falling or missing underneath the petal where they lay on top of each other. And I'm doing the same with the leaves here, just coming back in with pretty much the same colours again, but this time adding more. I have given myself time to look at the whole image and see where I think it needs a bit more depth, and I could never have coloured the shadows in initially. You do have to start with that almost like a wash of colour. The smaller flowers, or the filler flowers that are off to the side of this bouquet, I decided to colour them in almost like almost an ivory colour. So I chose a light yellow and then came in with a warm grey, and that just gives me a totally different colour that's going to work well with the other flower. But I didn't have the ivory colour in a marker that I needed. The other thing you could do is, instead of using markers, you can actually mix pencils and markers together. So say you had some markers, you could do your base layer with markers, but then come in with your pencils. If you've got more pencils or more colours, then it gives you the option of adding shadows and depth and definition using your pencils. You're not restricted to just one medium. But do be aware that if you are using like a wax-based pencil or any of our pencils, you can't come back in and colour over top with an alcohol marker. So make sure you do your marker colouring first and then add the shading with pencils. Right, so this set has a coordinating die, yay. So I did run that through my die cutting machine and then popped it up on the front of an A2 card. I did cover the front of the card with some pale grey cardstock and black heat embossed a sentiment, which is from the cupped flowers. I was thinking about adding some gold. I think gold would have looked really pretty on this card design, but I like a clean and simple card, and I liked the way that the black sort of popped on this design. So I added some black onyx, gem sparkles, but you can decorate it however you please. And the best thing about having such a large bouquet is it's a real statement piece on a card, and you really don't need to add much else to your design. So as promised, I've got a second technique using artist markers to create an antique flower. This one's really easy. Anyone can do it, I promise. If you have artist markers and you don't use them very much because you're not confident at colouring, this is a great way to get them out and get some bang for your buck. I'm literally just scribbling some of the colours here onto some 80-pound Nina white cardstock. You can use whatever cardstock you prefer. I just like the way that the markers blend on this particular cardstock. I am not, and in saying that, I'm not being too particular about my blending here either, because I'm going to be doing some die cuts. This is going to be a layered floral design, and I can add a little bit of colour after, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. One thing to be aware of here is to make sure that you colour enough area to die cut from. Also allow a couple of minutes for the alcohol markers to absorb into the paper, into the fibres of the paper, and dry. You're just going to get a much better crisp die cut from this technique. So this is one of the crafter flowers. It's a rose and has 4 layers in total. I did look at the packaging to work out which die cut needed the lighter and the darker designs. I didn't want to have a flat colour, and I wasn't being too particular about the blending. And then I just simply die cut all of my pieces, and I want to get ready to layer them up. I like to test my layers just to see how the whole image is going to look before I commit to glue. And I'm glad I did here, because I just wasn't happy with the colours I chose for the very top layer. To me, it just wasn't sitting right. So I actually did that top piece again. So I did come in and add some more depth with my markers direct to cardstock. And you can actually do this instead. You don't have to colour the base colour if you don't want. I just find I'm a little bit more loose if I'm not working on a die cut. I get too caught up in the designs. At least if I've got this base color, if I need to, I can add more, and if I don't, then it doesn't matter. I like to use a liquid glue to adhere my layers together. It does allow me a little bit of time to move the pieces around, and I know it's going to have a nice strong hold. And to be honest, I really love the way that this sort of apricot colour is mixing with the pinks here. It's such a pretty combination, and having the multicoloured look really makes it almost like it's a watercolour flower. So this is when I came in and made a whole new top layer. I just thought it was easier because obviously I couldn't take colour away. I could add more depth if I wanted to, but I just found that that top piece was too dark. And I kept in the same tones of the artist markers. But one thing to note is that one of the best things about alcohol markers is that you can mix any of the brands that you have. So the leaf, I wasn't particularly happy with how the leaf image worked out. So I did add a bit of depth to that just with one of the darker markers. Another great option would have been to create a layer for these leaves, because there's actually 3 layers in this set. I stamped a vase on some pale grey cardstock and just cut a panel that's going to be sitting on the front of the card, attached my leaf, and also popped up the rose. I thought it'd be fun to add quite a few ink splatters. I used both pure white and jet black. I just felt like I needed it, and it was just a great way to add to that antique style. I added a panel to the front of an A2 card and just popped up a simple sentiment. I hope you're inspired to get your markers out. I'm sure they're missing you if you haven't been using them very much lately. I've given you 2 different ideas to use them. I'd love to know in the comments below which idea you might try, or if you think that you like this style of antique flower. So this card is where we used the artist markers to create the layers for the die cut layered flower and used them in sort of blended tones. And the first card that we made, which was simple colouring, almost giving an antique watercolour look. I'd love to know which card's your favourite today, and I look forward to seeing you again here real soon. Bye.
Hello there! Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye!